What a head, son! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you through the ultimate guide to the upcoming Game Week 21. So Game Week 21 proves to be quite an interesting game week. Obviously the main concern all about Erling Haaland. Now that he might be missing the upcoming game week, all our attention turns to Salah and Son and who the best replacements to get. So this ultimate guide, that's going to be the main topic. I'll be going over my favorite 12 replacements for Son and Mo Salah, but don't worry, I won't be going over them kind of player by player. I'll be dividing them into 3 categories, and hopefully by the end of it, you guys have your replacement. Now I've also managed to squeeze in the usual talking points, such as the stats review as well as the Captaincy debate, which this week could actually be quite split. So if that's something you guys are interested in, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point I want to go over isn't really kind of a big talking point, it's more of reminders of some potential important factors that are happening this week as well as in the future. So the first reminder is the fact that there's still football happening this week. Obviously tonight is the FA Cup as I'm recording this video. It's United as the last FA Cup team. And then after that, we're going to have the live draw. So that's going to provide some clarity on the future doubles and the future blank game weeks. As when the 4th round is drawn, we can do our own predictions. Then coming up on Tuesday night as well as Wednesday night is going to be the Carabao Cup, the first leg of the semi-finals. So not kind of just one leg, these are actually 2-legged semi-finals. But the biggest factor is going to be that Liverpool game coming up on Wednesday, as a lot of us want to see that lineup. Then probably the biggest reminder of upcoming Game Week 21 is the fact that the deadline has now shifted. So it was going to be on a Saturday afternoon, my time, wherever you guys are around the world. It's now shifted to Friday night, as I think Luton vs Burnley has been moved to Friday night. So just make sure that you guys are prepared for that. If you want to have a reminder, don't worry. I do a deadline stream 1 hour before the deadline, basically every deadline. So if you guys have YouTube notifications or Twitter notifications, you'll get a notification when I do go live. But if you guys can't make this stream, don't worry. Just be prepared to make that team on about Friday afternoon. Please don't get caught out and miss another deadline. Then the last reminder I want to give is actually about the upcoming Game Week 21. It's the fact that this game week is a little bit weird. It's actually split over 2 weekends. So half the teams play this weekend, half the teams play next weekend. So don't be too shocked when only half your team has probably played in a few days' time. Now I've seen a lot of people over on Twitter wanting to captain a player on the second weekend versus the first weekend. Don't you know the logic there? I guess if your captain bangs, it's going to be a great week. If he doesn't, it's going to be a bad week. But I wouldn't look too much into the kind of separating the weekends. But yes, I agree, pretty kind of strange game week having half the teams on one weekend and then half the teams a week later. So let's see what happens for Game Week 21. Now because of that kind of split game week, just remember that we might not be getting those press conferences a week in advance. So for example, I think West Ham played the second weekend. We might not get a Jared Bowen update. That's going to be good. That could be bad, I guess. So I think training pictures this week are going to be integral. And that's why I'm actually tempted to captain someone on the first weekend, because what happens if they get injured in training next midweek? But don't worry too much about your plays in the second game week. I'm just kind of giving you guys a scenario that might happen. I don't think it's that likely. But now let's go on to the actual first talking point of our ultimate guides. As you guys know, if you've watched this series, I love going over the stats review to start off the ultimate guide, and I'll be going over the defensive numbers and the attacking ones. Recently, I also split this up into 2 categories. The first category is the entire season as a whole, and the second category is going to be more of a form category, and I'll be going over the last 6 game weeks. So let's jump straight into it because it's easier to see than explain, and I'll be going over the attacking numbers first. All of these stats are per 90 minutes, and the stat of choice for the attack is XG on penalty. So the left hand side is going to be the entire season as a whole, and as you guys can see, Liverpool holding strong at 2.09, and that's kind of the reason I want to look for a Mo Salah replacement from the same team, because I want a slice of that XG. After them, it's going to be Newcastle, Man City, Spurs, Chelsea and Arsenal, so kind of your traditional top 6 sides here, except for United. So now I see the popular teams are attacking pretty well. Now in terms of the upcoming game week, if we are to jump ahead to captaincy, we're looking at someone maybe from Chelsea like a Cole Palmer, maybe a Saka from Arsenal, that sort of thing. So at least these teams are backing up their stats with good numbers. Now on the right hand side is going to be the lowest XG per 90 minutes. As you guys can see, Sheffield United at top with 0.8. Now if you guys have defenders facing them, for example, Areola against Sheffield United this weekend, fingers crossed yet another clean sheet, as their attack is really struggling. We then have Burnley, Luton, Nottingham Forest, Fulham and finally Crystal Palace. Now we'll talk about Eze a little bit later on, but not great to see Crystal Palace struggling from an attacking point of view. But I guess he has been injured about half the season. So once again, left hand side, target these attackers, right hand side, if your defenders are facing these teams, play them because the chance of a clean sheet should be pretty good. Now let's see if things have switched up over the last 6 game weeks, so more of an informed metric, but please remember, some teams have had easier fixtures, some teams have had harder fixtures, but the one constant is that Liverpool are at the top. So they've increased their XG to 2.16, Newcastle also looking pretty good, they're followed by the North London clubs, Arsenal and Spurs, and then we have Chelsea and finally Brighton. So Brighton have improved dramatically over these previous game weeks, they're really looking like a coherent attack, a João Pedro even looking at a Gross as a differential, as a Son or Salah replacement. We were expecting them to bounce back, so maybe this is the time to get on them because the fixtures upcoming are pretty good. Other than them though, pretty kind of expected teams here. The longevity of the teams through the entire season and the short term looks pretty good. And Liverpool once again showing why they're the best attack. Now on the right hand side we've seen some downgrades. For example, Brentford's attack has been struggling, but the one I'm actually worried about is going to be West Ham, as I was looking at Jarrod Bowen as a Salah replacement. Now this doesn't mean that Jarrod Bowen is not going to score FPL points, maybe on these low XG chances, he's a clinical finisher, but I would have preferred him on the left hand side versus the right. Other than West Ham and Brentford, we got Burnley, Sheffield United, Forest and finally Crystal Palace. So once again Palace are struggling. Now that's going to be kind of the attacking numbers. Now I'm going to switch it up and go over the defensive numbers where I do have 2 different stats for each side. On the left hand side I'll be going over expected clean sheets per 90 minutes and we can see Man City and Arsenal are the clear favourites. Now as always, if we could predict whichever Man City defender plays most games, they'll be absolutely golden, but as a double up of Arsenal owner, the stats haven't been backing up the actual FPL returns. So let's hope Game Week 21 might be different. They are facing Crystal Palace who have been struggling, but haven't had much success from Gabriel and Saliba at all. Also have Konza from Aston Villa who hasn't got me many clean sheets, then Newcastle, Liverpool and finally Brentford. So if you guys are a Trippier or a Trent owner, their teams are still putting up good numbers. Now the more exciting side is going to be the right hand side, so this will be expected goals conceded. Now the reason I've switched this up is because if you're looking for Captaincy options or attacking options, you don't care if a team loses the clean sheet, you care how many goals they're conceding. So Luton are the worst defense at the moment, conceding 2.3 XG per game, followed by Sheffield United, Burnley, West Ham, Fulham and finally Bournemouth. So yes, that West Ham defense has actually been getting us some clean sheets from Areola. What this tells you is that they are still conceding those chances, but Areola is saving them, which is the perfect combination that you want for your goalkeeper. Now in terms of Fulham, if you are looking at maybe captaining a Cole Palmer, they look like a good side over the entire season, haven't looked that great. But Bournemouth are also on my mind as I look to bring in maybe a Dayvy Jota. But as you guys can see, the right hand side, slightly more enticing, Captaincy options, attacking options. I'm more excited towards the attackers. Now let's see if things have switched up on the left hand side and the right hand side over the last 6 game weeks. And as you guys can see, a big addition is going to be bottom of the left hand side, and that's going to be Fulham. So we just spoke about how Fulham over the entire season haven't been great, but over the last 6 game weeks, one of the best defenses, but they might have had easier fixtures. Bournemouth also a little bit of an anomaly there at 0.39. So could this be a site of maybe Bournemouth are going to be a tough game for Liverpool in Game Week 21? I don't exactly know. Other than them though, Man City, Villa, Arsenal and Liverpool all expectations. But on the right hand side, Newcastle are actually the worst defense. So interestingly enough, Newcastle and Fulham have actually swapped places. In the previous Ultimate Guide, Newcastle were where Fulham is and Fulham were where Newcastle is. So massive improvement from Fulham, to be honest. Now their Newcastle stat is backed up by the fact that they conceded 7 XG to Liverpool in Game Week 20, but before that the XG conceded was also pretty bad. So the one thing to note here is who are they playing this game week? It's going to be Man City, so should we be captaining an Alvarez or a Foden? I mean, Newcastle have to bounce back eventually, but will they this game week? I don't exactly know. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you do look at kind of Captaincy options. Phil Foden, Alvarez should be there, and obviously Erling Haaland if he's back fit. We then have Luton, Burnley and West Ham as expected, but we now see Spurs and Chelsea here, but they might have a tougher games, and Spurs have a lot of injuries in the defensive department. So I know that Bruno's name has been floating around as a Salah or Son replacement, so they face Spurs this weekend. Could this be good luck? I don't know if I'd go anywhere near United though. But as you guys can see, some major switches up from a defensive department. Should we still consider Chelsea and a Cole Palmer, even though Fulham have been defending well in the previous game weeks, or will they regress to their whole season average? And all these stats came from Fantasy Football Fix. You guys can go over to their OptaStats sandbox. They've got a bunch of stats and you can just check whatever your heart desires. But now let's go on to the actual big talking point or the main purpose of this ultimate guide. It's all about who should you replace Mo Salah and Heung-min Son with. Now as mentioned in the introduction, I'm actually going to be going over 12 options divided into 3 categories, and and the first category is almost going to be no-brainers. Now, how I would describe a no-brainer is basically a player that's nailed to play probably 90 minutes, and they have good attacking stats, and overall are just good FPL assets. So the 4 players I want to talk about are going to be Cole Palmer, Saka, Gordon, and finally Jared Bowen. And what you guys might be looking at is that you own maybe 3, 2, or all 4 of these options. Now, the only option I might caveat is going to be Anthony Gordon, just the fact that he is quite cheap. If you guys want to keep some money in the bank for a Salah upgrade, Gordon might be the one to go for, but I'd probably bench him in Game Week 21 and maybe Game Week 22. So the thing about these 4 players is what I would say is that if you don't own any of them, maybe besides Anthony Gordon, except I still believe he's a good option, but if you guys don't own Cole Palmer, Saka, or Bowen, I consider them to be the best assets. Now obviously with Jared Bowen came off with a knock, but I do believe them playing the second weekend, he has about 2 weeks to recover from that knock, and I think that he should be fine, but I want some more clarity before the deadline. But I think out of those 3, whoever you guys don't own should be number 1 on your list, and that's what I would recommend. But let's dive a little bit deeper. We're not a surface level channel. Let's go over the stats and the fixtures. Starting off with the fixtures, not the best, but there still are some good ones. So I'd probably say that Cole Palmer has some decent to start off with, but then they slowly get worse. That Man City game is particularly bad, but before that he has Fulham, Wolves, and Crystal Palace. The added bonus though about Cole Palmer is that he is so cheap, so even if he blanks against Liverpool, blanks against Man City, he will still overperform his value. Now with Saka, has good fixtures on the cards here. I think if you guys look a little bit deeper, West Ham, Newcastle haven't been defending well, but the thing about Saka is that his form isn't that great. Then with Anthony Gordon, short term maybe a void, but then from Luton, Nottingham Forest, and Bournemouth, you're definitely going to want him in. And that's why I might say instead of going for him, punt on another option for 2 weeks, and then you can always go for the Newcastle winger shortly. Then finally Jared Bowen. Now Jared Bowen has to be fit for Game Week 21. I wouldn't recommend bringing him in from Game Week 22 onwards, even though United haven't been defending well. So the biggest thing about the West Ham striker is that Sheffield United game. He has to be fit for this game week to be worth bringing him in, otherwise he's in a void. But as you guys can see, the fixtures aren't necessarily the best, but I do still believe it's worth punting on these options, with the obvious exceptions explained. Now let's go over those numbers, and as you guys can see, most of these options are perfectly nailed. Cole Palmer didn't start the season off too hot, and that explains his reduced minutes. In terms of extra non-penalty, remember the non-penalty variant, Cole Palmer's would be a lot higher as he had a few penalties this season, but Bowen comes out trumps with that advanced striker slot. So 0.41 compared to around 0.3 for the rest of them. Then moving to XA, we can see that Saka has the highest, followed closely by Palmer. But those penalties really shine, and Cole Palmer really shines in the points and expected points metrics. So Cole Palmer's actually scored 7.19 per 90 minutes. Compare that to the rest of them, not that high, but I guess he has played less minutes. In terms of expected FPL points, he is slightly overperforming, 6.9 compared to 7.2, but the rest of the players are kind of on par. Now these numbers might not jump out at you, the only one that probably does is Cole Palmer, as we're pretty used to seeing Mo Salah's numbers being quite high. But just a reminder, this is kind of the no-brainer category. I've just kind of slipped Gordon in slightly, but I do believe out of Cole Palmer, Saka, and Bowen, whoever you guys don't own, they would be high on my list. But now let's go over some differentials. So the next options are going to be the punts that I would go for. These are going to be differential assets that I believe are worth it. Their expected minutes might not be that high, but the ceiling is going to be high. So let's go over who I'm going to mention. So the 4 players are going to be Richarlison, Jota, Foden, and finally Luis Diaz. I know there's 2 from Liverpool, but you've seen their attack, it's pretty good. Now the reason I think these players are kind of more punts to go for is that either in the short term or medium term, their expected minutes might not be that hot, but I still believe they might be worth it as a Salah or Son replacement. For example, let's talk about kind of Foden with Haaland coming back, Kevin De Bruyne coming back. His minutes might be up in the air, but whenever he plays, he gets you FPL points. It's the exact same with Diego Jota. When Salah comes back, we might have some rotation there, but currently I believe the most informed attacker for Liverpool, and even off the bench, he's pretty dangerous. Then with Richarlison, Maddison coming back from injury, they just signed Timo Werner. I still believe Richarlison is nailed for the short term, but once Son comes back, maybe there might be some switch up. So that's why I consider him more of a punt. Then finally Luis Diaz, same thing with Jota. That front 3 might rotate. You got Gakpo, Darwin Núñez, Jota, Luis Diaz fighting for 3 spots. And then when Salah comes back, which might be the Burnley game, who knows what's going to happen. So as long as you guys understand that these options might be more punts to go for, they might score more points than the previous 4 I just spoke about, I wouldn't be too surprised. Now let's go over the fixtures first, and the fixtures, to be honest, aren't that great. Spurs and Man City basically kind of mirror themselves, starting off with a harder fixture. although I'd probably argue United's going to be a good one. And then after that, the fixtures look pretty good. With Liverpool, just the kind of attacking department, I think they're one of the most fixture-proof sides at the moment. The only worrying thing is that if Salah's back for that Burnley game, that's really the one that you want Jota for. Then with Phil Foden, I do believe Kevin De Bruyne and Haaland might take an extended break here. Don't think either assets will be rushed in, so Foden should be nailed for the short term. And that Burnley fixture in 22 looks particularly tasty. Then finally, Luis Diaz has the exact same fixtures as Jota does. And overall, the fixtures on all of these players aren't the best. But let's go over the attacking numbers, and as you guys can see, none of these options are particularly nailed. Phil Foden has good minutes because of Kevin De Bruyne's injury. Otherwise, I wouldn't rely on them to get 90 minutes every game. But at least when they do play, they get you some FPL points. You guys can see per 90 minutes, 0.6 for Richarlison, definitely more of a striker role compared to his assisting threat, and 0.48 for Jota. Slightly increased XA there for Foden as well as Jota, and that's going to help them in the points metrics. Now in terms of expected points per 90 minutes and actual points per 90 minutes, you guys see that Jota performs particularly well, but just remember, he has played less minutes. At least he's putting up some good numbers when he plays. So you guys can see actual points 7.65 compared to Richarlison 7.14, but both these options are outperforming, but Jota definitely more. Unfortunately, with Luis Diaz kind of falls off a bit, whereas with Foden, per 90 minutes, when he does play, he kind of averages the same as the previous options we spoke about. And with Man City's attack looking pretty good and the fixture's not too bad, that might be a punt worth taking. So I think it's quite clear out of these four assets, unfortunately Luis Diaz kind of edges off a bit. That's why Jota's my favorite Liverpool replacement, but I probably would say Richarlison's ahead of him. I think Foden comes in maybe third with all the news about Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland, but that still leaves you with two pretty good punts to look at. Now the last options I want to go over are going to be even more kind of differential punts, but they're still safe punts as their game time is nailed. So the four options I'm talking about, and this might give you more clarity, is going to be Eze from Crystal Palace, Bruno from United, Odegaard from Arsenal, and finally Gross from Brighton. And as you guys can see, all these players are nailed to start, but their attacking returns haven't been that great. Only exception might be Eze. When he has been back from injury, he's looked red hot, just such a baller. The only concern there is that Crystal Palace attack. If you guys also saw the news, Lise is going to be missing about 3 weeks. Is that good for Eze because he's on penalties now, or is it bad because the attacking numbers are going to drop? I guess you guys can push your agenda. Now the reason these assets are going to be on the list is because their fixtures also look pretty good, and as you guys know, fixtures create form, so that could happen with any of these four. Best fixture is definitely going to be from Brighton's side. Their attack has improved with some tougher games, so imagine with some easier fixtures, and Gross should be nailed with all those injuries in that Brighton lineup. I still believe though that Bruno's fixtures are also pretty good, but as I mentioned, probably wouldn't go near United. I want to see them get better form. Then with Arsenal, we spoke about those sucker fixtures, short term definitely good, even medium term looking good, but Arsenal are going through a little bit of a purple patch. Then finally, Eze has some good games coming up, except for that maybe Arsenal one in Game Week 21, and that's something a lot of people aren't looking at him. So now let's go over those stats numbers, and the stats aren't looking too fantastic. A lot of these options are nailed when they aren't injured. For example, Eze has played less than 1,000 minutes, but when he's been back, he's playing every game. But compared to Bruno, who's played basically every minute, he's definitely safer. Now in terms of XG on penalty, there's a massive increase in Eze 0.32, and then XA goes to obvious Bruno at 0.34. But the points scored hasn't been too great when these players have been on the field. Maybe except for Eze at 5.31, that's comparable with someone like a Foden or one of the more nailed options that we first spoke about. But as mentioned, if the fixtures are looking good, these players might increase their attacking output. I would consider these players to be more of a punt though. Maybe if you guys support United, you could go for a Bruno, but out of these three, I'd say Gross with the fixtures or Eze with their attacking form. But I think the previous options might be slightly safer. So to kind of conclude, what I would probably suggest, I'll do my own personal rating. I think right now, the number one replacement might be going for someone like a Bowen if he's fit. The second one would be Richarlison, and then the third one maybe a Jota. But if I didn't own someone like a Palmer, a Saka, I'd definitely go for them first. So that's my kind of ranking. Let's say Bowen first, Richarlison second, and Jota third. But you guys might have a completely different kind of rating depending on the players that you guys own. So comment down below, who's your Salah/Son replacement for the upcoming Game Week 21? What you guys can even do is just do a rating of all the players, no matter who you own, to give the other viewers some more clarity. A definite big decision though, I was almost hoping that Erling Haaland might be back, as I only have to choose one replacement, as going for two between Richarlison and Jota might be tough as a Liverpool fan. But that's what we love to see in FPL, some variation, so comment who you guys are going for. Now the final talking point I want to go over is going to be all about the Captaincy debate. If Erling Haaland isn't fit, if we don't get news that he's starting, which is probably not likely, I think the Captaincy might be split this game week. So a lot of options to go for. I'll be going over 3. The first player I want to shout out though is going to be Jared Bowen. The only reason I haven't gone for him is with the knock. I don't exactly know if I'd suggest captaining him, but if we do get news that he's training, definitely should be in the debate. So the first player I want to talk about is going to be Phil Foden. Now I know I might be biased, I own Phil Foden, but obviously you guys can go for Alvarez if you want to. Both kind of equally. I think Alvarez may be a slightly better option, but it all depends on what Newcastle side rocks up for their Game Week 21 fixture. You guys would have seen the stats. Newcastle's defense, the worst defense at the moment, at least recently over the last 6 game weeks. So imagine what Man City can do to this team. Now projected points aren't really liking Phil Foden at the moment, but just remember the algorithm does take it a while back. Newcastle is a strong defense in its opinion, but recently they haven't been great. Now I'd probably say that maybe Phil Foden or Alvarez is more of a punt move. With Kevin De Bruyne and Haaland kind of lingering, the expected minutes might be lower, but 60 minutes of Foden or Alvarez might be enough. The next 2 options I think probably where most people are currently. The first one, Cole Palmer, has Fulham at home, great fixture, great form. And then Saka, not the best form, but also a good fixture. Now the projected points do like Saka. Most projected points websites are rating him as the best option, so the kind of stats review is going to be Saka. But I'm personally on Palmer at the moment. I just personally don't really mind the armband on Cole Palmer. In great form at the moment, looks absolutely insane, and Fulham at home is a good fixture in my opinion. Now will the Captaincy armband stay on Cole Palmer by that Game Week 21 deadline? I don't exactly know. Last night I just watched Saka for Arsenal, didn't look that great, and that's on favouring the Chelsea man even at his cheaper price. So don't let the price affect your decision on Cole Palmer, please. As you guys would have seen, the stats per 90 minutes are simply outstanding. He might just be FPL gold at the end of the day. But once again, like the Saka Son replacements, comment down below who's your captain going into the upcoming Game Week 21 deadline. Maybe we get some insight that Erling Haaland's back fit and will start against Newcastle. But this is going to kind of wrap up the talking points, but as always, if you guys have any talking points, comment them down below. I try to reply to every comment as usual, or you guys can go over to my Discord server and I try to reply to every Discord post, as I can't really cover everything in these ultimate guides. But this is basically going to wrap up the video, guys. Hope you guys did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for the team selection coming up in a few days' time, where hopefully I get more clarity about my Salah and Son replacements. But for the time being, I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL and I'm out. Cheers, bye.